You are listening to The Gray Zone, the podcast of the century. Again.
The Gray Zone.
This week's guest is none other than Reverend Randy Thompson. Hello.
Hello, also known as William Thompson, as you are. So we
also known as the Crow.
A lot of things, and we'll leave it at that. But yes, that's those are all true.
Are those the only nicknames you have? You got Randy Son?
That's another. Yep, there are probably some from my past that aren't really coming up these days. But yeah, those are some of them. Answer to a lot of things, but those are the good ones.
Randy Thompson is my father. I am brought to you by Randy and Peggy Thompson. This podcast, though, it's brought to you by some people who aren't that good, but they're still pretty good, including iONGreenville.net. Go to iONGreenville, do your iONGreenville picks every week. Do them now, because you still stand a good chance to beat me. Dad, I have not been doing great at these. It's been a lot of fun, but covering the spread this year has been different. I'm not great against that. I've been pretty good before, just not this year. Really struggling and kind of surprised with some of these things. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Also brought to you, of course, by the number one magazine in town, Fet Greenville magazine. FetGreenville.com comes out every week, every Wednesday, just like the Gray Zone podcast. Although this week we're a little late, and that's okay, because it's the podcast of the century, right? Again,
game of the century. But we should be clear about iONGreenville. Everybody should have that queued up, because that is such an incredible intro into what is going on. If you want to plan your week for all sorts of activities, music, food, just festivals in general, iONGreenville's great.
It's everything. It's podcasts. It's the Peace Center. It's terrific.
It is. It is the one stop for where you would like to be and know. It's the best thing going.
It's free. It's intuitive. I love iONGreenville. I didn't know you used it. That's terrific.
Oh, you have to if you want to be on top of stuff. And when you're out of the country, you don't use it so much. So we've been out of the country a bit lately, but that's okay. I don't have an eye on Florence or an eye on Rome.
Or Greenville, Kentucky.
Oh, neither that. Or Greenville, Mississippi. All those Greenvilles. But iONGreenville, South Carolina. It's all good stuff. And
all right.
Fet TV. Fet is amazing.
Fet Greenville TV. Number one.
The whole.
Here we are in the month of November. 2-1, side by side, go together, just like Fet Greenville and iONGreenville.net.
It's perfect.
It's hard to beat. Also, GVL Media. If you're interested in producing a podcast like this one, hit me up. I'm on Twitter at Color of Gray, Instagram at Color of Gray Studio, or just find us gvlmedia.online. See what we can do. You can do a podcast just like this one, only better.
Only better is right, but GVL Media,
thanks, Dad.
As an emerging company, is going to be fantastic, and it's a great value. Some of the best people in this type of audio-visual thing, directing, putting together all sorts of promotional videos, whatever. It's a media empire, if you will, for the area. So it's another great thing. All good stuff.
Dad's a co-owner. That's why he loves it so much.
What?
I can't say I blame him.
Full disclosure.
I'll drink to that. I got you here this week. So in full disclosure again, I was supposed to have a Georgia fan. Now, I've struggled this year getting fans. It's tough. Scheduling is tough. Getting it out during the week is tough, especially with traveling fans. So that's kind of who I'm targeting, is people who have actually been to these games. Mm-hmm. So I was supposed to have a Georgia fan. The reality is I've had 4 Georgia fans on this year and no Bama fan. So it's overdue. This is... we don't have to call it the game of the century. I think that triggers some people, and I don't know why we even call it the game of the century, but it's definitely going to be fun. It's super competitive. This is a big game. It's a conference game. This is a rivalry game. This is hard to beat, and so I'm really, really glad you're here. I wish I'd have thought of it sooner, because this makes a lot more sense to talk to you before this game. First things first, who you got in this game? Who's winning?
Ooh.
Let's just start right off the bat with that.
If I add up all the intangibles, I would give a very, very, very slight edge to Alabama. But we just don't know. And that's what we should talk about on this podcast, is there are 2 things. We know, everybody knows, and the other thing is we don't know. And we're going to find out. At this time of year, the favorite quote I have is from one Dabo Sweeney, who said, "They remember November."
That's right.
And he is so profound that it comes up every year, same old thing. I'd like to do a quick shout-out to a couple of guys at lunchtime today. I met, when I was working out, I met...
Please.
saw David and Jordan. They're two brothers. They are Clemson grads, and they have they're engineering types. Very, very nice guys. But I got to tell you, they're season ticket holders. They are to me at Clemson.
Go Tigers.
Sure, yeah. Okay. But they are the very best in fandom, and what that means is these guys know and understand football. They're almost Spockian in their analysis because they do. They love it. They do. They love college football, and they can talk without getting emotional one way or the other. But
really?
It's like when we lived in Cincinnati. The Cincinnati Reds baseball fans were so knowledgeable about the game when you went, and we had season tickets and all that. But David and Jordan are great.
Now I want to talk to these guys, David.
You do, and I told them that today. I said, because we catch up, and it's such a pleasant conversation. It's they know all the teams, and they're not biased one way or the other, but it's just refreshing.
I don't have a problem with bias, by the way.
I don't either.
I really don't.
I understand that, but they don't unjustified say this team is so much better because it's my team or anything like that. They have a very good outlook about the reality of who plays whom, about who's hurt, about who's doing this and that in any one weekend. So it's just really good, and I hope we have that conversation today just about where we are. So the game of the century first out of the bat, if you ask me the question again, who do I see? There's some intangibles. One of the intangibles, Nick Saban's going to do something different. You may see Slade Bolden at quarterback again.
You think so?
You may see something like that. Now, let's be clear about what has happened in 2019 in college football. The protection of the receivers has become has evolved such that a guy like Sarkisian can get good athletes open and without having to worry about a Jack Tatum coming in and taking their head off. So both of these offenses will score points because it's hard to defend against that. What's going to be key, in my opinion, we'll see how it works out, is Burrow going to have plenty of time to throw the ball down the field. If you ask me who LSU's featured running back is, or ask most people, they're not going to be able to tell you. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody knows who Georgia's is and so forth, but you don't have one of those. So that's one of the things they like to throw. They will throw. Jefferson's great and so forth, and we'll see if Alabama defensively can put pressure on the quarterback. Certainly at Alabama, the biggest there's so many weaknesses now with mainly it's a youth. You got a bunch of teenagers in critical positions, and people have seen that in some of the games. So how that works out is to be seen in this big game. And people say, well, they're not freshmen anymore now, this and that. And yes, they're freshmen. They're still teenagers.
Yeah, a lot of these guys are true freshmen who were replacing seniors.
Well, and juniors like Dylan Moses, who was not only Dylan Moses will probably not see a snap this season, but he'll probably still go first round in the NFL because he's that good, he's that smart, he's a leader. And so, next man up and all that sort of thing. Same with McMillan. This defense will be much improved next year, and they have all obviously learned a lot in the games in which they played. But, we'll see how that goes. Now, turning back to LSU, they have had some big games against big ranked teams, good ranked teams, top 10 teams, and they've performed well. They've won. Okay.
They've won. You can definitely say that.
Yeah, they've won. Okay, so they're undefeated.
They beat Auburn, for example. Is a healthy Bo Nix better than an injured Tua Tagovailoa?
Don't know about that, but I don't think he's better than Mac Jones. Frankly.
Agreed.
That's one of the big things that's overlooked, all the whiners.
I don't know that it's overlooked, so I'll try to keep this short. But getting back to your point, tell me the names of your friends again. Who are you talking about? David and
Jordan.
This one's for them.
They're brothers.
All right. Go Tigers, guys.
Yeah,
I like to hear that stuff. And, this week We had the college football playoff come out with their initial rankings. Clemson's ranked 5th. And I'm not trying to single them out, except that does sort of feel like an outlier because it's the first team out, so to speak. The collective, I don't want to say fury, but there's just been so much talk about all this stuff and eye tests and this doesn't, and who have they played and strength of schedule and we've got this and this, that, and that to me seems so incidental because people are angry and upset. You just mentioned your friends who watch football. Dad, I haven't gotten to watch nearly as much football as I would like this year, but most years I get to, and I've been really fortunate. Like this past weekend, game day was for Memphis and SMU. Oh, I was so happy. I'm still happy about that. That game was terrific too. But I think what most people don't do is watch or know or try to understand and try to even respect any of these teams, let alone most of them. And there's a lot more competition now than ever before. If you do try to do that, if you try to understand more teams, especially the biggest group at the top, let's say top 10, you're not going to have a bad time. And I promise you, you will not be nearly as upset about what anybody says about anything because it's so worth it. So kudos to them. I wish more fans were like that. I wish more vocal leaders behaved that way because there are a lot of people watching these games who aren't acting like it, who aren't watching them with the same eye, so to speak.
They are, but the thing is, it's gotten way too neurotic. And those guys, again, to use the Spock term, they are very logical and know who's. But my comment to both of these guys was that the clearest path to the playoff, and we don't have playoffs, we have a playoff. It's singular.
Oh, here, cheers.
To all the people.
Slancha, to the Fusiliers, and to good grammar, punctuation, and spelling. Dad, I say I can't. I tell people that the same. We just had daylight saving time, right?
Right.
Oh, no, actually, it's standard time and not savings.
Right, it is. That's correct.
But that's irregardless, right?
Oh, it's irregardless, right. It's right in my ear.
Had to.
Okay, so
here's care less.
Anyway,
we're done.
How much less, on the caring continuum, how much less could I care? When people say that's another thing.
I could
care less.
Yeah.
Well, how much less could you care? That's another excursion.
I actually care a lot.
Let's go to one of my points to David and Jordan is
Please.
that the clearest probabilistic team to reach the playoff is Clemson. And it doesn't really matter on November 6 or 7 who's ranked where so much. It's going to be filling in. But Clemson has a very clear path, the highest probability of any of the teams to be undefeated. Of course, the probability of all those 4 teams of being undefeated is 0.
0, this year.
Well, you got 2 conferences playing one another. So you got Penn State playing Ohio State. You got LSU and Alabama. So somebody's out. Somebody's going to be looking outside looking in.
Well, what they won't have is the argument of being undefeated. And it's kind of a loaded issue, but we haven't had that before. We had the potential to have it this year, of course. Everybody starts, basically without a loss every season. But there's something to be said for, again, this is a hot issue, so just take this with a grain of salt. Let's have a deep breath first. Clemson's 2021 schedule, for example, does not look strong. The ACC isn't exactly recruiting at a level to make me think that they're going to be strong. Now, they could. The argument is that you can't predict if you're going to have a bad schedule. You also can't predict if it's going to be good, right, for these teams who it ends up being good. But I think that you can have a pretty good estimation based on things like recruiting, state of the program. Florida State just fired their coach. What's that going to do? Make them competitive in 2 years? I doubt it, but that sure would be beneficial. If we ever had 5 conference championships with undefeated teams, and let's say undefeated Notre Dame, we're going to have some tough decisions to make. It's not this year. Clemson controls its own destiny, and rightly so. They're one of the best teams, and they might be one of the best teams in 2021 as well. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's a real legitimate concern.
Yeah,
and I think that that's more of a concern to me than I could ever get angry about these polls, especially in week one. Especially in week one. The very first poll, Dad, do you remember who was number 1? The very first CFP poll, I should say, the College Football Playoff Committee poll.
You mean this?
No. The very first one 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
Wasn't it 6 years ago? Yeah.
That would.
Or is it 5? Doesn't matter. Let's just say 6. I think it was 6. Wait, no, it was 5. It was 2014. I'm silly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me, because I can't remember.
Klenga. Mississippi State.
Wow. Okay.
Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
How do you feel now? Because they lost that week too, right?
Yeah.
Next thing you know, they're not ranked number one. So again, the narrative was this is SEC bias and that kind of thing. And my whole thing is, even if you believe that's true, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah. Well, in this day and age, you do have the playoff. Well, you got the four teams that come through this system, and they can play. They can see who's good. When you can go back to a team like Boise State and UCF and these types of teams, and how good are they in those when they weren't in a major conference? Well, Boise State turned out to be a pretty good team when they put the hurt in, when they beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. But
that was a decade ago. Dad, they've been that great year in, year out, mostly ever since. They're terrific. UCF is a really good example of a team that, maybe isn't as great this year, but they've been competitive. South Florida, not great this year, but they've been competitive. Memphis and SMU, warms my heart. The AAC has more ranked teams than some Power 5 conferences in all three polls right now, and it's not illegitimate, and that's, not including independents, too, of course, like Notre Dame and Navy.
The problem, though, is you have teams like, not the problem, but when you look at teams like Clemson, you say, well, wait a minute. If there's one thing you can absolutely positively say is the T word, and that's talent. And they've recruited great talent. All you got to do is turn on the TV on Sunday and see a lot of the players there. So they have the talent to back up, where they are. It's not Clemson's fault that the ACC is not, not so great. It's not a historic Florida State team or VPI, also known as the Virginia Tech. Virginia Polytechnic Institute. But some of those historically good teams, Miami, who was really not an ACC team until fairly recently.
Right.
You got all these teams that especially the Florida teams who are in the hotbed of talent and play. Clemson gets a lot of good players out of the state of Florida and not all over. But Clemson's got they've got the talent. The thing for me is that, and I don't know how to articulate this or even how it plays out. If you aren't playing against even semi-elite teams that have a lot of skilled players, I just don't know how that translates into how good you really are. I just don't know. And I'm not using that to say that that's the determining factor. Again, I go back to the talent. Clemson's got very good talent in key position. They got playmakers, and so they show up. They will show up no matter what, and they will be playing in the playoff. If there's any one team, I would say that's pretty much guaranteed. And the next team, I would say in that order of who will be in, I still think it's Ohio State, and we'll see when they play Penn State in a couple of weeks. But Ohio State seems to have all the talent, and we'll see about Fields when he gets a little more. He hasn't really been tested against some really good defenses. Having said that, they got Penn State, and they're going to have to
Wait a second. I know I don't have to sell you on Wisconsin. That's a good defense. That was the best statistical defense, including after that loss. It was incredible what they had done.
Okay, and all right, granted.
They hadn't let anybody score, I think it was one touchdown. They had 3 shutouts before they faced Ohio State, and Ohio State beat them by
and this is the Wisconsin team that lost to the Fighting Illini the week before. So I don't know how data like this plays in its point in the season.
And even with that loss, they were number 1 in defense. That's what's crazy.
With a Big Ten schedule, which is not playing a ranked Big Ten team. And that's the other thing. How in the world with qualitative data? You don't have really quantitative data. You get data against other teams. I don't know how good Northwestern is.
They're bad. That's okay to say. It really is. They're real bad, Dad. They're not good at all this year.
Okay, so back to the point. We got the playoff coming up. We got this thing out, and we know who will play whom. Let's look again. To those teams that are ranked in the top 4 will not be undefeated. Okay, to those teams. So will another one lose? I mean, could Penn State lose to Penn State? Sure. Ohio State lose to Penn State? Sure. Could they get upset by Michigan? Ooh, not likely, but people said there's no way Kansas State will ever beat a team like Oklahoma.
Yeah, that was to me the oddest thing about this whole playoff.
Right.
You know, I can understand legitimately more about Clemson being number 5, and obviously right on the outside edge looking in. I think that's going to change too. But Oklahoma dropped real big, and I didn't think that was on the offensive side again. It was the defense once again. And don't forget, they got in last year and won the Heisman because of the brand new Big 12 championship game. That's a guaranteed rematch. Only this time, I don't think it's going to be against Kansas State. However, Baylor. Whew, man, oh man, if it is Baylor, you know, Baylor's got TCU this weekend in Dallas. So basically at TCU.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Basically, it's at TCU.
Well,
TCU's lost a couple. Baylor's undefeated, but nobody's really talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know much about Baylor, Dad?
The Baylor Bears.
Do you know much about them this year?
Not since Grant Taft left. That's not that much. Because of that, who watches? I'm sorry, but in this neck of the woods, who really watches a lot of Baylor Bears? Thank you very much. But that's
first of all, I got my hand raised.
Okay, he does.
Matt Rule is the coach.
Okay.
I love Matt Rule. I loved him at Temple.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think he's a terrific leader. He's the next. I hope he's the next big thing in college football. And if it's with Baylor, I will celebrate it. I'm also not picking against Baylor for that reason until they lose. TCU's quarterback has another broken finger. I think they're on their third quarterback now.
Mm-hmm.
TCU is favored by a couple, but I'm going with Baylor. And I could be wrong, but until proven otherwise, I'm all in with Matt Rule. I'm such a big fan of his, and they needed exactly this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to see what happened with Florida State this week. I don't know how much you heard about this, so I'll try to keep this short too.
Willie Taggart. Okay.
Well, yeah, they fired Willie Taggart.
Mm-hmm.
They said, but the reasoning was, and they owe him a lot of money because he was. It's a young contract, so to speak. Florida State's been having money problems. They said that the boosters, they actually said this in the press conference, that the boosters are going to have a lot to do with this decision. I've never heard that actually said out loud by an AD before, even though that's probably what happens in a lot of places, but not quite like this. They're going to need a lot of money. However, I digress. The statement and the collective cultural response has been, we want to be championship caliber. We want to be elite, and we will not settle for less. Dad, that's something that personally for me, and tell me how you feel about this too, I tend to latch onto brands like that. Brands like Ferrari, where, you know, DeMontezemolo says, if a Ferrari isn't winning a race, it's not a Ferrari. You know what I mean? Championship or bust, that sort of stuff. I love best is the standard. Yeah. I love that mentality. I love betting on yourself. So that's where I stand with that.
It is difficult at Florida State. They have.
I'm surprised. I didn't think their culture would be like that. Did you?
No, but they have a home and home now against Alabama. I think they're set. That was just announced. But
that isn't it. One of those two seasons, they also play, I think, West Virginia on their road.
Okay, but let's just be clear when you look at their schedule and who they now have to contend with Dan Mullen. You know, they were so happy to see Jimbo go, to get rid of him, to find a reason to get rid of him. A lot of people did not like Jimbo Fisher, even though, you know, he won that year with Winston, who was, it was an interesting year. I'm not sure anymore how you can make a team elite without getting a coach with a little more, a little better resume than Willie Taggart. I mean, you got to go after somebody. My opinion, you don't go after formative coordinators.
Sure.
You just it's not worked out too often. It's not worked out now. Given that Georgia has done that with Kirby Smart, and he's had really good talent, and University of Georgia, no question, historically has been able to get a lot of really good talent, but not so sure. Woof woof, yeah, they do,
dogs.
And it continues, and they'll continue. They're going to have the talent, and they had been it may be just a little bit different for Kirby, and he's getting it done. So let's see how it works out. Now, having said that, right now without Justin Fields, I'm not sure how deep they're at quarterback, and I'm not sure how the rest of the season's going to, work out this year. Don't know about Florida State. I do, though, know about Mario. and that is
Go on.
I'm going to flip the
Man,
switch.
yeah, you're all over the
Let's
place.
go to.
I could
Well,
leave.
it's
You
been-
do the
we've been in the
podcast. I'll
Southeast
just
for a
take the
long time.
credit.
Let's go west, young man. Let's go west. Let's go to Mario Cristobal because
Or the
we're down all these
sunsets
people,
high.
all these teams, and here's the thing. Yeah, if we have a duck.
It's time to move on.
Okay, whatever.
Moving on.
Thank you very much. Next.
Did you get to watch the Oregon game at SoCal last weekend?
I did.
It's terrific, right?
Yeah. Well, did you get to watch Oregon game at Washington?
Yeah.
That in Washington is a very good coach and everything, but anytime you're playing Washington in that environment, in the fog and the moon, all that stuff, it ain't easy. I got to tell you
Seattle.
that while you and I were in Atlanta watching the Oregon Auburn game with your twin brother and
Roll Tide, Bennett.
yeah, baby. But if they'd won that game, what would the talk? And they could have easily won that game.
It came down to one play.
It
I mean, you
did.
could make that argument.
You could, and my point being is that don't take your eye off the Oregon ball. Mario Cristobal's doing a very good job. He's recruiting well. They're playing better than they did against Auburn.
They have a defense.
Oh,
Oregon has a defense.
a what? A Duck D? You got to be kidding me. The Ducks are on D. What a shock.
If you watch the Ducks, to me, okay, you mentioned that we're out here on the Eastern Seaboard and we have all this stuff and we don't really pay attention to teams like the Ducks. So if you watch them and you don't care, you can just sit back and enjoy, right? And I guarantee if you watch the Ducks, especially in a game like at Washington or at SoCal, you're going to have a good time. You're not going to be disappointed and you're going to go, this is really neat. It's fun to watch. And I can't deny that it's good football.
This is a good team.
Justin Herbert might be the best quarterback in the country, but I personally disagree. He is sensationally good, though. He's very talented. He's got the frame for it.
Yep.
He's tough, Dad. He's tough.
Well, he's got the
I don't
smarts.
love the uniforms, but I love the Duck.
You do, and the helmets don't even belong in Formula One. Those are kind of outrageous. Let's just leave that and swoosh to all.
That's
that.
their ML. So that's definitely a personal thing. That's sort of a cultural identifier for them. It's if you love it, congratulations. If you love helmet stickers, there's places for you to go too. We're looking at a picture of Herbert right now in a green jersey that looks real simple, and I think that looks stunning. There's no team with that green.
Well, the mean green out in North Texas, I don't know. Well, that's North Texas with
Marshall.
Mason Fine, who could be the best quarterback. I don't know.
How about the Ohio University Bobcats? Go Cats!
Yo,
That's
are
green you can put your hat on, right?
Yeah,
Come on.
Harvard on the Hawking over there. Yeah, they're amazing over there. That's true. But
Not
the
this
other
year.
one is
Not this year.
no, okay.
Just let it go.
But they have the former Nebraska coaches still there. But the only other green, if we're talking about green, that Duck outfit looks a lot like Notre Dame when they're home. If you've noticed when they bring out their green, it's kind of like that. Not that big a deal. It's that big a deal. But let's go back to the playoff. Can we return to the playoff?
Oh gosh, I thought you'd never ask.
Okay, because now we've got what's going to play out down the road. Will there be a one-loss SEC team? I mean, you got to look at the SEC as having somebody in. We don't know who that will be. It will be highly likely this weekend in this game. Who prevails? And there's a lot to look at. In that game, I shouldn't be reverting to this game. Oh, let me say revert back.
Thank you.
Which doesn't make sense either, but it's redundant. Anyway, let's revert to that game for a second because there's a lot of these guys got to clean a lot up. But you got that's one team in. Highly likely LSU won't lose another. Alabama could win and lose one. If LSU wins, they're home free to the Dome to play in Georgia. So that
that's true. I was trying to think who else they have on the schedule this
they
month,
have,
but it's A&M, and they're better than A&M. That's clear.
Well, see, the worst. Okay, A&M has no pass defense,
and don't they play South Carolina too? So yeah, I'm not really.
Everybody knows A&M has no defense. Pass
now that I
defense.
think about it, South Carolina, that'd be kind of fascinating.
Okay, but
I'm not wrong, am I?
No, yeah, you're.
Anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, it's Missouri. I think it's Missouri, right?
Well, they played. South Carolina plays A&M And I think LSU, it doesn't matter. I'm not worried about it.
So I'm not worried about it if you're an LSU fan.
Let's put it this way.
You're home
Georgia's
free.
already lost. It was a bad loss at home against South Carolina. But Georgia's almost certainly going to be in the SEC title game representing the SEC East against either LSU or Alabama.
Correct.
That game is going to be sensational.
Okay.
It won't be boring.
Which game is this? The SEC?
Whoever plays against, the SEC title game.
Okay. Well,
It should be good, fundamental, competitive football, no matter who's in it.
It will be interesting to see.
And it's okay to enjoy that too.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's always good to enjoy this. So we got what? Let's put the pegs in. I'm going to put these pegs in. I'm going to say the first team in the playoff is Clemson because they've got a clear.
You say first team. You mean they'll be ranked first?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying statistically, probability of their losing a game is very, very low.
Gotcha.
The Big Ten whoever the champion is, could lose, have a loss, and one of the losses could be in the Big Ten championship game. Excuse me. The other is, the LSU West champion should be in. And that's going to be very interesting from that perspective. But Clemson's the first thing to say. Look, they're home free. Let's be clear about that. They don't have any speed bumps. They got nothing in front of them.
Well, they can't afford to trip up. Let's put it that way.
What does that mean? Trip up
to lose a game
against whom?
Well, if they do, they're out. That's all I'm saying.
That's true, but not. Look, who is it? Wake Forest. They gave up 59 points against Louisville.
Wake Forest has been prolific on offense, but I don't know if you heard. Now they're out. They're 4 best guys in the secondary against the best passer in their league. I think that's going to be a bloodbath, and I don't think it's going to matter.
No, it won't. I mean,
I really don't think there's any threat, and I don't necessarily think that's, again, I don't want to overcomplicate this. I think it's going to be an issue, and more specifically for Clemson because of the way it looks like everybody else in the country is going to naturally attribute to. And the rest of the competition, the ACC might not. Look, I'm hopeful the ACC network money, the extra millions, is going to help these teams start to, get better coaches or, reinforce their things on their program that they can use to attract recruits. But that still takes time too, and I'm not sure if it's going to be quick enough. I'm still legitimately concerned about 2021. Clemson faces UConn. What was the FCS team? It's Charleston Southern or something like that, and of course South Carolina. And then you got Notre Dame in there, the other 4 out of the next 5 years, and then Georgia. But Trevor Lawrence could legitimately be at Clemson. I don't think he will be, but he could be playing against one of the worst looking schedules I've seen in a long time. And what I don't want is for an elite team to be left out. I want an elite team to do something more within their power to try to get in, to prove it. I think I'm kind of surprised more fans aren't more upset that Clemson isn't playing, say, for example, Michigan or Oklahoma State or Oregon State or anybody else we would beat all those teams, great. That's what I want. I just want one of them.
Yeah.
Well, the ACC will get better. I sure do hope so, but is it going to be soon enough? Florida State, like I said, they're committed to it. I would only be surprised if it doesn't work. Look, they fired Taggart. They fired him quick. But, Dad, don't forget, Jimbo Fisher won a national championship. We don't have to like him. I don't think he's one of the best coaches in spite of what a lot of people think. However, he was certainly competitive, and they were happy with the results for a long time, too. They fired Taggart. You do that once. You only get to fire a coach that quickly once when you're committed to being excellent. So I'm really, really curious who they get to hire.
Yep, and we'll see. We'll see where the money is.
They make it sound like it's going to happen before the year, which I think is
it's not
misguided.
Yeah,
if you're going for that top tier, it's got to wait.
But it doesn't matter. In my opinion, it's Clemson, and just like Dabo says, it's the rest, the ROY, the rest of y'all. There's nobody, and when he says the rest of y'all, he's talking. In my opinion, he's talking about the abject depravity of talent, venues, anything in the ACC. There's no, you can't recruit well.
Yeah, it was created out of the Alabama stuff, though.
Yeah, but let's look. Clemson's a beauty. It's got a lot going for it. Beautiful campus, really good, strong tradition. So
do you think they're going to be competitive next year?
Who?
Clemson.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying.
About 2021?
Absolutely.
Well, how can you tell? You can't tell how good a schedule is going to be. I think you can. I think you can tell some teams are going to be good, and Clemson's a great example of that, right?
Correct. I'll concede the point.
That's all
there. And
it works both ways.
It does. It does. So, but please don't.
And I would love to see Clemson beat the crap out of, say, for example, Michigan, or even Memphis.
Well,
I like Memphis.
Yeah.
But I think that would just be more interesting for everybody and way more beneficial to all these arguments. Look, what's been really frustrating to me is to hear so many people yelling about stuff that literally doesn't matter, hasn't happened yet, probably won't happen, and more to the point, the only thing that really matters is still going to happen, especially this year, knowing what we knew before it even came out this year.
Yeah. Well, it's even like back in July, August, people were putting Clemson in the Fiesta Bowl in the Final Four.
What's this magazine you're looking at? Because it's got Alabama and Georgia in the playoff, and Oklahoma and Clemson.
It is.
Now, this came out before the season, but my whole problem with this is you're either does it say their record? The suggestion that Alabama and Georgia would both be in there flies in the face of the rule that the committee has been explicit about. Because if Alabama and Georgia were undefeated, they would play each other in the SEC title game. One of them would lose, and one of them would be out of the playoff because that's what the committee has been explicit about. No conference title rematches allowed, period.
Let's say,
for better or worse,
an undefeated SEC West team is beaten by Georgia.
Okay.
And so what happens there with that undefeated regular season team? And that's conjecture also. The only point I was going to make is,
to be fair, that it's only possible this year to beat LSU or Alabama, and I think that puts Georgia in. So there's your answer.
Well, the point is Clemson. I don't care if it's Street and Smith's, Lindy's. I don't care who you grab. Everybody had Clemson in the playoff, and a lot of people had them in the Fiesta Bowl because the 1 and 4, and you don't know who the 1 and 4 is going to be. The one team could very well be the Big Ten champion, and I think that's who one of the teams in Atlanta will be in the Peach Bowl. I think that's the way it works out, but.
Well, it'd be 1 and 4 in the Peach Bowl, right?
It
so
would
if
be.
Clemson's at 4, isn't that what they want?
It's going to be tough.
Most fans, I should say.
Well,
rather than say number 1, like the argument is, hey, we want to be number 1, not 2, because we have to go here instead of Phoenix, if I remember right.
Well, the number 1 team is going to be either the Big Ten champion or an undefeated SEC champion, which may be a stretch now. It would be a bit of a stretch. But if Penn State or Ohio State were to run the table, one of those teams would be ranked number 1.
Okay.
No question in my mind about that.
Great.
Strength of schedule, etc. So then all I'm saying is Clemson will be there. I would bet, barring ETN or Trevor, somebody getting hurt.
No, see, and I'm not trying to be unfair about this. I think, let's say, God forbid, the worst possible thing happens to Trevor Lawrence, freak accident, struck by lightning or something. He's tall, it could happen, and he can't play for the rest of the year. I think the team is so competitive. I think the schedule certainly allows for it too, but Chase Bryce is legitimately really, really good at throwing the football. That's the truth. He knows the offense. I wouldn't worry about that. Obviously, Travis Etienne, great running back, but Clemson can afford to be without him. Lynn J. Dixon, to me, he looks even faster than ETN, but he's certainly competitive. I'm not worried about any of that.
Okay,
and to be fair, they haven't really had a lot of injuries this year.
No, the D-line, O-line have both been injury-free, and they're not likely to get injured against the teams that they're playing. So all you're doing, but that just reinforces my point that Clemson's in. No matter what the drama or neurotic thoughts are about who somebody didn't like me because I'm not in the top 4. That does not mean anything because they're in.
Well, you can have that opinion too, that it's us against the world and all that. First of all, I don't like it, but it just is disproportionate. Don't scream it. Don't scream it nonstop, especially in week 1 of the playoffs. I'm out on that completely.
So, a lot to see there. And
best is a standard, so behave your best. Do better.
This could be one of the best playoff situations in the last few years. Because
now you're talking.
We are looking at some really good football teams. We don't, and I'm sorry, we have had some not so great football teams that were there, being Texas and Notre Dame a couple years ago. I don't think, well, Notre Dame and Clemson are the only two teams in the playoff that didn't score a touchdown. Clemson put it on them, and Clemson didn't score a touchdown the next year, whatever, against Alabama. But be that as it may, you have some prolific offenses that are almost unstoppable because of the passing game. You get really good quarterbacks in Burrow, Hurts, Tungboa maybe in there now with even Herbert. But let's just
Tungvailoa's in there.
Okay, well, I mean, who knows? He's going to play. He's not going to play. I don't know. Whatever. But you've got and Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you've got really.
I've heard of him.
You got really good quarterbacks that are going to be playing in the playoff, and it's going to be challenging for any of the defenses. Here's the other thing, Gray, that I don't see in this year's four teams, unless the only outlier would be unless. And I had no idea Alabama were to get Dylan Moses and Joshua McMillan back. That could change things. But
Dylan Moses tore his ACL 2-3 days before the first game of the season. He's not coming back.
He's not.
And he shouldn't. He's a millionaire in the way.
He'll never play down to college football. He only played 2 years college football. That's fine.
Typically, Alabama is just stacked with those guys, whether anybody likes it or not, whether or not that's the way the game's progressing too.
Okay.
It's just been almost a perfect storm the way they've lost so many guys over the years and the way that they don't have that kind of depth. And Dylan Moses was kind of like Terrell Lewis last year, who was hurt all year, that everybody sort of wanted to see what he was going to be able to do. And it's really to me, you can hate Alabama all you want. I don't celebrate any of that stuff, and I get it if you do, but it's really, I don't like to see that happen to anybody, especially with their best star. And for me, personally, on defense, it's even more true.
It is more. And that was one person. I agree with Paul Feinbaum back when he said that this was a catastrophic loss for Alabama. He said that, and I agree with it. Because
even Dexter Lawrence, when he didn't get to play in the playoff.
Yeah, but
you didn't notice them miss a beat, but I still wanted to see him out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but he wasn't the alpha dog.
Sure, but I still wanted to see him.
Yeah, Christian was the alpha dog, but Dylan Moses was the alpha dog. He was the coach. He was the the coach on the field. If you go back to Dante Hightower, all these guys that Saban coaches up to be the defensive coach in the field, which it's tough at Alabama. They play a 3-4 sort of. They play a 3-4 defense, and then they switch to 4-3. About a quarter of the time they play a 3-4. But they've had to adjust and often play a 4-3, maybe a lot of adjustments, a lot of nickel packages now because of the prolific, because of a lot of changes. Of course, the receivers, everything going on with people going to Big 12 looking offenses, and they can. But if you don't have a guy in that defensive lineup like a Dylan Moses who understands X's and O's and who can talk about defensive schemes, then you're lost. It's like Javier Arenas going in the pros, and they were telling Arenas, who was an Alabama guy, said, this is our complex defense, this is our base defense. And Arenas said, well, wait a minute, Alabama, your complex defense is our base defense. So it's this thing about losing a guy like Moses. If he were there, if McMillan were there, they're not. And you don't have the only team, let me take one thing back. I really look at Ohio State, and they may have the best defense. I'm going back.
I'm with you.
No,
I absolutely agree. They held Cincinnati to nothing,
and they got hair on fire players that make a difference. You can't block.
You can't fake good fundamentals like that. They've been so, I would say, they just haven't stumbled.
No, they got the talent.
They had one half where they didn't score just destroy Wisconsin, but scored right before the end of the half. Scored to start the second half, and next thing you know, it was kind of a bloodbath. I think Ohio State is legitimately number one. I think they look just about equal with Clemson fundamentally, except Clemson basically had one stumble. Ohio State hasn't. Tougher schedule. It's hard to say at this point at all.
Well, but I really do.
But Ohio State has it coming up, so.
Ohio State has,
and to me, frankly, Wisconsin alone is enough to put them 1A and 1B if nothing else.
We'll see when they play. In, 2 weeks they play Penn State, the Pennsylvania State University. But the
Nittany Lions,
the Nittany Lions,
Lehigh Valley.
And I don't know is it in Happy Valley or is it in the Shoe? It's in Happy Valley.
Oh no! That one's at the Shoe.
Okay,
and then they play Michigan at Michigan.
Okay, well that's outside of Clemson. That means to my opinion, and we'll see if it's worth anything, but it looks like Ohio State's got the next clearest path to the playoff. And having said that, back to your point, they have some really good coaches. They've got some really good talent, and they're playing better and better every year. I mean, every game, in my opinion. They haven't had any games that really look that close.
Not even close.
No. But the defense, it's one of these old-time defense-looking schemes where they really can just shut teams like Jonathan Taylor.
They're savages. On
defense. And I thought the Wisconsin game would be a reasonably close game, but it was not. So
it wasn't first, but most games are.
Yeah, well, I just think again, if I had to pick, had to stake my life on who would be the winner of everything, it would be Ohio State University. I just think. Everything you see, offensively, defensively, and that's the defense wins championships. But I think that would be the case. I think this is an instance where they've got a really good offense, a really good quarterback that Georgia kind of misses, and a well-coached, stout, talented defense. So and seasoned. I just think OSU is going to be the hardest team to beat. That's my opinion. And we'll see how it works out with everybody else. LSU, I'll tell you this right now, with Delpit with the sprained ankle, when we go back to another good defense, I'm just not too sure. I watched Florida put up 21 pretty easy points down in that Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge. Mm-hmm. So I just don't know. But I haven't seen that from Ohio State University. So, and I certainly haven't seen it from the University of Alabama or anybody else as to have really good defenses, total defenses. And I'm talking about D-line, secondary. They look pretty stout.
I think Clemson does too. It might be harder to tell outright, but I mean, fundamentally good tackles in particular from the secondary, ironically enough. But
Clemson has a really good D-line. I'm not certain about if Clemson. I just don't know about their secondary. Kellen Mond put up quite a few points. The secondary is pretty young, realistically. And they can get covered up by a really good defensive rush, just taking the quarterback out of the equation, which is probably going to happen right down the road. I don't think there's a quarterback they'll face that's in the top 10 Heisman list, and Mason Fine being one of them. They just don't. There's a quarterback that would test. And there's no O-line that will test that Clemson's secondary until they get to the Fiesta Bowl to get to the playoff.
And which I'm just going to say to dovetail from that, this playoff is going to be exceptional. Yeah, everybody's not looking forward to the playoff enough. Clemson's going to get to prove it. They don't necessarily have to prove it this year. If that's the way they want to look at it, fine. And just to get into the playoff, that's okay. Mm-hmm, sure. And then you get to prove it, which they've done plenty before. And you can't keep using that as an argument. You have to be more excited to say that we're going to get to do that this year.
Oh, yeah.
But I tell you what, it's kind of interesting to notice the parity with the quarterbacks. I'll get to that in a minute. But any of these teams that look like they're going to be in the playoff, let's say Oregon, Ohio State, Alabama, LSU, Georgia, Clemson, even Oklahoma, let's just throw it out there, or Penn State. This is not a boring lineup at all whatsoever. I'm thrilled. None of these guys have prima donnas or egotistical maniacs like Cam Newton or a Johnny Manziel or even a Baker Mayfield to some degree. None of them have those guys. And in fact, any of the guys who are in the top contention for the awards, like in particular the Heisman obviously is a trigger award for everybody, but just none of those teams have those guys anymore.
Nope.
I think we're seeing less and less of that in college football outright. Okay, Justin Fields, don't forget, was at Georgia. Mm-hmm. Thank God he's not sitting the bench. You know, Gardner Minshew was it Eastern Carolina or Western? It doesn't matter. He transferred to Alabama. He would have sat the bench there too. Thank God he ended up eventually transferring to Washington State, where we got to watch him have fun with his mustache.
Yeah, Gardner mustache.
Jake Fromm would have been in Alabama if not for Tua choosing Alabama first. And Joe Burrow, obviously, don't forget, was Ohio State's next guy. And then he was at LSU and wasn't sensational. Well, now he is. Now he's a legitimate Heisman contender, and rightfully so. It's just kind of funny. I think we overreacted when the redshirt rule or the transfer rule came out. Justin Fields obviously burned an entire year that wasn't necessarily up to him, but what a waste. That's how I feel about it. Thank God it's not being wasted even further, period.
Yep. And good for it. It's good for the game. Good for college football.
Now, we got to get to some of these games. We can talk about some from last weekend. I will say having Memphis host SMU is a highlight for me. I think a lot of people were in favor of SMU, Southern Methodist University.
Dallas, Texas.
Because they were undefeated.
Where your cousin is.
But, yeah, exactly right. He's a grad now, right? Didn't he graduate?
He will be graduating in May.
He graduates in May, and then he's going off to
Switzerland. He's going to be
Switzerland.
He has dual citizenship, so he will be. He's accepted a position in Switzerland in Zurich. So he is. He's off there
to represent the Southern Methodist University.
He does, and
but I digress. People were picking them because they want to see an undefeated team, or they wanted some chaos. But I don't think people really had any inkling about what either team was capable of who they were. SMU reminds me of the way that the best teams were playing a decade ago. Their defense is huge, full of dudes who look like refrigerators, right? But they're talented, they're athletic, believe it or not. Their offense is better than when Chad Morris was there, certainly, but Memphis is one of the better teams outright, period. They lost at Temple, and that's all anybody saw was that they were 8-1. Did you happen to see that loss? How they lost on the road in Philadelphia?
I did not, but
they're driving the ball down the field. A guy catches a pass, I think it was on third down, catches it, and they're going to line up, and they say, the last play is under further review. Like, oh, okay, we're going to look to make sure it's passed. So then you're watching it in super slow-mo, high def, and you watch him he catches the pass, right? And then go, okay, let's see what happened. Pass was incomplete. Game is over. Like, what? No, don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. And so people misjudge him. Again, getting back to what we were talking about before. You just watching the football, numbers will tell you some. They can help you represent some ideas and some narratives, but watching the actual football is just way better.
Oh, it is. No question about that.
Every single time.
But never, on these plays like that, I thought Oklahoma was going to come back against Kansas State with that onside kick, which was really, really, really close.
Oh, that was hard to watch.
Because
then you're just watching replay for 20 minutes. I can't stand it.
You did, and that's true. But as Coach Bryant used to say, when we lost to a couple of times, one that I distinctly remember where it was a razzle-dazzle, crazy play and we lost in September to a team. Sports Illustrated had the picture of the guy's knee was down. It was down to the spot, but they had this trailer that they allowed the ball and he ran. So it was an illegitimate play. Coach Bryant's reaction was, it should never come down to that. We lost the game on a play, whether his knee was down or not. It's like, get over it. We got beat.
Yep.
And that's what gets me about the replays of the replays. I mean, and it's gotten really crazy. Certainly if you're if you're a Saints fan and you saw if you saw the Super Bowl taken away from yikes, that and how they do that.
Well, that's even worse because now the NFL literally created a rule as a result of that. Now you can challenge for a penalty.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's good or bad. I really don't.
But it's replay. Back in the day, we didn't have replay. So it is what it is. You got to go out and line them up and beat them and let that be it. So it's a lot of good teams lining up and beating other teams. And who knows with these four teams in the playoff, it's going to be, like you said, there is no clear-cut dominant offense, defense, every special teams team out there. If LSU were to emerge and beat Alabama by double digits, run the table, beat Georgia, wow, they would have a pretty good argument when they get healthy and to be heads and shoulders above everybody else. But
Sure.
that's a lot of football to be played here in November, so we shall see.
I digress. Memphis
Oh,
beat,
Memphis.
beat SMU
Yep.
in the Liberty Bowl.
Yep.
You mentioned Coach Bear Bryant.
Yep.
His last game
Yeah.
was at the Liberty Bowl.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you remember who he beat? I remember it was a win.
It was Illinois,
That's right.
and it was
And I remember lost the Iron Bowl to Auburn that year, and they said, Coach Bear Bryant says, I'm going to retire. And they asked him, what are you going to do next? He said, well, I'll probably up and die.
yeah.
So he beat him in the Liberty Bowl, and then on January 26th, that was that.
Yep. And he made a comment to this guy that was his driver for years and years. He got in the back of the car, and he said, I haven't been as close to the Lord as I should be. That was one of his and that's a true story of this person that he was very, very close to. But yeah, what an incredible person. No quite the best football coach ever to do what he did in that era against all these different teams. And
That guy was greater than the sum of his parts, when he was so much more than just a coach. Obviously, that was a little bit before my time too, but his legacy still rings real loud in Tuscaloosa. Nick Saban has kind of muted a lot of that. But, and his birthday being on 9/11, that's when I was living there the first time, so you couldn't really celebrate it. That was a difficult day, but there was no place I'd rather be for that one. I'll never forget it.
Great stuff. Got to shake his hand, got to meet him, got a nice letter from him.
All right. Now let's get to these games. So speaking of Alabama hosts LSU. Both teams coming off a bye week again, as they do every year, since the former LSU coach, Nick Saban, became Alabama's head coach. Now, I want to ask you, as a University of Alabama alumnus, I'm just testing.
Yes.
LSU, to me, was always, until Nick Saban got there, they were always just a forgettable team, like a homecoming team. They weren't great. They were once great 30, 40 years ago, but they were not great for a long, long time. Alabama was not very good at all when, back at the turn of the century. But LSU being good all of a sudden with this guy, Nick Saban, I remember it. So it was Nick Saban, head coach. Offensive coordinator Jimbo Fisher, defensive coordinator Will Muschamp. I mean, it was like the Avengers. We just didn't know it at the time.
Right.
And I remember when Nick Saban got hired at Alabama. Look, he wasn't at LSU long. They won a championship when he was there. He left LSU, won a championship the next year, basically with most of Nick Saban's guys.
Yep,
and it was kind of all downhill from there. They were never really that competitive again until they got rid of Les Miles, who ironically enough is making Kansas more competitive than they've been in a long time.
I'm loving that.
Yeah, me too. Less is more.
Yeah.
I digress. I remember when Nick Saban got hired, and I asked my brother Bennett, so there was so much turmoil with Alabama coaching. You had Dubose, you had Price, you had Franchione, and I liked Shula. It was the first time it looked like Alabama had a coach that put them on the right track. A lot of those guys who won that 2009 national championship were Shula's recruits. I liked the way he behaved. Obviously a legacy guy too for Alabama, and we fired him to hire LSU's coach?
Well,
that short guy who
Dolphins,
who was just in the NFL, that's who we want? And Ben, I remember his response was, "Oh yeah, great. That's what you wanted, Alabama. Oh yeah, this is good." And all right, I guess he's going to have to prove it. and then he lost.
How
many games did he lose in the first year? 6, including the Southern Miss.
With John Parker Wilson. You got to look at the play. He didn't have the great players. I mean, he's able to recruit just like he did at LSU.
All I'm saying is I didn't understand the hire at the time. I wasn't happy about it. And I think certainly it's hard. It's easy to forget.
It is, but it's a process. It's the same process he's used. You look at his pedigree. He really learned from Bill Belichick, Bum Phillips, and those guys, and he played even at Miami.
Sure.
He just couldn't handle the culture really when it gets down to it. He hated pros and all the mischief and the drama of the pro players.
You don't have control.
No,
if you can find the right program and you're a cultural fit, you get all the control, and that's what he has at Alabama.
Well,
that's what some coaches have
too. He wants to develop players. He wants to make these guys knowing that most.
Well, that's control. To me, that's what it is.
Yeah,
you can't control millionaires who are egotistical maniacs.
You can't. So
you can't even control Cam Newton to tuck her shirt in. You know,
well, that's
and not wear women's clothes.
Well, that's I don't know where he's gonna be selling shoes now.
She'll be fine.
Yep.
She's still got the or the yogurt commercials. I don't know.
He
Sorry, Dan, I don't like
does.
your
I forgot
yogurt.
about
He sells a different brand.
Right. So we'll see how it works out for him.
I don't know. Maybe she can start
What a
selling
turnaround.
shawls or something.
Yeah, and Christian McCaffrey's.
Anyway.
Anyway, that's all good stuff. He's
I digress.
Yep.
Nick
Okay,
Saban this year
Yep.
inducted into the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame.
Okay.
He said there that his biggest regret in his professional career was leaving LSU.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
As great of a cultural fit, and I think a better cultural fit he is at Alabama than LSU. I thought that was interesting. Personally, I think Nick Saban's a great leader. I try to emulate people who I think, act, and feel, and behave in a way that's more healthy. It's certainly been more beneficial to me, and we see it. That's I've talked about this a lot, so I'll keep that short too. It's just one of the reasons why I love college football so much more, especially more than pros. In spite of the fact that there are some good examples now, like Deshaun Watson and like Tom Brady, like it or not. However,
well, when Saban said, what was Nick Saban saying when and here's the thing, he left talent under Les. That, you look at Les, he's out there eating grass and he's acting silly.
I love Les Miles.
Yeah, he's great.
I love him.
He's funny. I know, he's refreshing. But let's just take what happened. If you look at the players that Alabama recruited from the state of Louisiana, because that's what Nick Saban could do, and I'm talking a Heisman Trophy winner, let's just leave it at that. But I think and I'm speculating, from a personal standpoint, he took Miss Terry down to South Beach and had to deal with a lot of crap that he didn't like. Now, granted,
She didn't like it either, though.
No, nobody liked it. I mean,
Yeah.
he grew up, West Virginia, running his daddy's or working at his daddy's gas station, and he never did well for his dad. Never did anything right. He always had to do it over and everything. So he goes down there with his disciplined mindset, and having been under, he left LSU for that for the big prize, and thinking he could win the Super Bowl, and found out it's there's a lot more in the NFL than you can imagine. So he did that, and then and looking back to what he had the momentum to keep this thing going at LSU for a long time. And so when the opportunity, he wasn't going to go back and replace Les Miles. But when it came up at Alabama, and he took it, and the rest is history. But I understand where he's coming from saying that at LSU. Just like it and live with it, and congrats.
I celebrate it.
Yep,
I think it's terrific.
Sure.
I'm trying to keep us on schedule here a little bit.
Schedule. Okay, sorry about that. Let's
just keep it. Let's just stick with Alabama LSU for a little bit.
Okay.
I think this game could go either way. I think let's go back a few years, back 2011. Horrible tornado destroys Tuscaloosa, cuts through it like a laser, destroys homes, kills people. Destroys businesses. Even players on the Alabama football team didn't survive, and that team went on to create history. That history was a national championship and the eventuality of the college football playoff. That team, to me, still holds a special place as being the most dominant football team under Nick Saban. So the point spreads were bigger than any other team that they've had. In fact, I heard an interesting stat this week. It was, I think, Clemson, this year's Clemson, that Alabama team, and I think the first year of the playoff, that Ohio State team. Okay. It's Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State, let's put it that way, have held their opponents to 300 yards or less per game and scored a certain amount of points on average more than their opponents. That team was special, and that team was scrutinized so much because of the defense part. We wanted offense, and now we have it. Now Alabama has a legitimate competitive quarterback who, to be perfectly fair, they've had some good ones. Never anybody quite like Tua Tagovailoa. He's fantastic. It's never been an identity. The defense is getting better. I wouldn't even say they're bad. I'd say they're pretty good. But it's not the identifier that Alabama's had under Nick Saban for over a decade now. It's not. And special teams is kind of atrocious right now, if you ask me. But it's I don't know how we can't enjoy this game more. You can hate Alabama all you want. You can even hate the SEC. You can believe in the bias and the conspiracy. But this game is what we asked for. Two teams that are playing on prolific scoring offenses with defenses that are not as great as they have been for both teams, by the way. Could you really ask for anything more?
No,
It's even in the daytime and after a bye week, and it's a rivalry.
Yep. You couldn't, except weather. And here it's raining in Tuscaloosa right now, but it's going to be a clear, cool
It'll be cool.
day. It'll be clear and cool. And 45 is going to be there. President Donald John Trump will be at the game, it seems. So that will be an interesting
It sounded like he was protesting.
Wow. So
talking about him.
That's quite a thing to have the president of the United States of America coming to
that's just supposed to be a joke.
because he's gonna be coming to with his red tie to a red state and to a red team, and he will probably, I would expect he will get a red reception because he's the president. He holds the office of the president, which, as Joe Burrow said, should be respected regardless of anyone's bias. But I think
same thing as Jay Spivey, for what it's worth.
Yeah, right. And I'm just happy that my 401k is well, and I'm glad everybody.
I don't like that it's a distraction.
But anyway, so he's going to be there. So the
security.
So we'll see how it's going to be great weather, great atmosphere, great. So we'll see if the better team wins or not.
How do you feel about those new lights, personally? Just personally.
I'd have to be there. It's like the Grand Canyon. You don't understand it till you get there visually to see it.
You know what? That's a great point. Okay.
So I don't know.
I said the same thing about Mercedes-Benz Stadium this year. I was blown away.
Ask Clemson, because Clemson's doing the same thing. They're getting the LEDs. So they're going to do
everybody's going to get them.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming. It's a really effective and inexpensive upgrade.
Yeah,
everybody's going to get them.
If you've ever been, like I have, to Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, you don't need the LEDs down there. It is a crazy atmosphere, especially at night. And, I was down there when we lost a close game to LSU under Coach Bryant. And I guess Bradshaw was the coach then for LSU. But be that as it may, so this is going to be with LEDs, without LEDs, whatever. I think if it's going to come down to coaching, are we going to be able to out-coach that team?
Are we going to want to?
Out-coach.
Yeah.
If can Saban pull together these troops, a lot of them hobbling around, and a lot of them not hobbling as badly as they were.
Who else was injured this week? I know Miller Forrestall out with a vocal cord injury for 6 weeks.
That's pretty much it. What I was going to say is Evan Neal's back, and he's not a very big guy. He's 6'7", 370 pounds. So he's
still out. Trey Sanders and Antonio Alfano, transfer not hurt, but he committed to Colorado this week.
Yeah, that's great. Good for him. That's fine.
It's just this team in August isn't who they are now at all. It's very strange to see that much disparity.
In so many ways, it's not the same team. That's fine. Brown is back on the offensive line. The kid that transferred from Florida State's back, who's really playing well on the offensive line. If Alabama cannot win this game with this offensive line, and with Najee Harris being healthy and some of these other running backs that are better than advertised, that would be sort of a rude awakening.
Najee Harris was banged up. Sprained his ankle?
But he's
and then obviously Tua had surgery.
He's practicing. Najee is practicing with the firsts as of Monday. He was out there with the first full pads and everything. Najee looked pretty. Ali Cahoe, not sure. I think he's back also. That's a big deal. A lot of these freshmen are better, I think, and here's what may be, when we're talking about this thing Sunday afternoon, what may be a big deal for Alabama is LeBron Ray. Right. If he is back and wants to make a point, that could be between him and Terrell Lewis. Though there's some defensive guys that are kind of, I hate to say emotional, and stuff.
can,
They're
'cause I
kind of
just-
sick of hearing how bad Alabama's defense is.
Terrell
I think
Lewis
they-
just said he feels disrespected.
Who
That's
does?
scary. Terrell Lewis.
Oh well, but he'll be.
That's a big dude. That's a scary.
Well, he's big, but he's fast. He's quick. He's got great hands. He's smart, and he's articulate. He's got all these attributes that are incredible. So yeah, there's a lot going there. When you sum all these things up, and with Divinity being out, what Alabama's got to do, in my opinion, to win this ball game is something they've not done, and that's be disciplined. Not not holding teams. When third down, you got a third down, you're going to go off the field, and they get the first down. Get first down. Too many. When you look at those statistics, that's not been a good look for Alabama. Number one. Number two, well, let's take.
That's true. I thought I'd say they were the most penalized team in the league. I could be wrong, but they're certainly up there, legitimate or not.
Well, yeah, but they're too many teenagers out there that aren't disciplined. Number two, though, and part of that is not only the penalties, not only the third down, not getting off the field, that sort of thing, but the penalties is way more than a typical Alabama team on the discipline side. So the discipline has not been there.
They had over 100 yards in their last game, or against Arkansas. Over 100 yards of penalties again. Arkansas had 0 penalties.
Mm-hmm.
Now, legitimate or not, you're right. There's some problems.
Way too many penalties. So that you cannot keep that up, because ask the University of Florida against
especially
Georgia
in a game like this.
You can't do that. You can't go have it. You can't do what Tua Tagovailoa did against Tennessee. You have a first down at 3 and throw an INT. And
Why?
please, you cannot do that. I'm just saying.
You know what you can't do is talk about Tennessee after we've already played them. You can't talk about them on this podcast.
It doesn't matter.
Not today.
He threw.
We're done.
I don't care if it's against the South Georgia Barber College. You can't have.
I'd rather play them.
All those Barber colleges that you can't have a first down at the 3 and throw an interception. That's a silly interception.
No, that was awful. But you mentioned coaching. That obviously wasn't a coaching mistake. However, here's my thing, and this is a question I have for you. Nick Saban has shown that, especially when the defense is going to struggle or needs some help, that he wants to keep them out, keep the offense on the field, running clock, running the football. Alabama has not been necessarily great at running the football. With that said, LSU hasn't been necessarily great at stopping it. However, I think LSU is going to be able to score enough, and the game plan has to be to score more than them, obviously. I'm not sure keeping it on the ground is enough. And my question for you is, how do you think Nick Saban and crew handles that from a coaching perspective? Do you think they air it out more in spite of Tua's questionable health? Do you think they play Mac Jones early or even to start? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think one thing that's different, you first look at the identity of the offense. It's a pass-first offense. Seriously. I mean, we had that, believe it or not, under McElroy. People didn't believe the statistics, but when you look at it, you see that. So this is based on throwing the ball to ridiculously fast, deceptive, sure-headed receivers. That's the good news. That's also the bad news, because you're in there and then they're gone, and your defense gets worn down, and it's a young defense. So that's a problem.
Right.
You got a running back, Najee Harris, number one, all this stuff coming out of college in his junior year, and it's now his junior year, averaging 6.3, 6.4 yards a carry. But here's the rub in this type of offense. We're going to miss Miller Forstall for sure.
Big tight end, he's out.
We're going to miss him because he's seasoned, so we're going to miss him, we being Alabama. But the other part of this is your offensive line either does a better job at passing or at running. They're trained to do those things as a passing offensive line or as a running offensive line. These guys are trained under Sarkisian to be pass blockers more than anything. That's my opinion. So when you do that, it's hard to transition. You've seen Alabama have a lot of trouble transitioning from a passing with the post and with the slants and even with the bubbles and all the other stuff. Then transition to that, give it to Najee, and if Alabama were able to run and get yardage, like in the old days when you needed yardage and you just go get it, right? Line up and beat the man on the other side. Have not seen that, and there's a bunch of jerseys in Alabama that say "Run the darn ball because that's not a good look. That's the thing. If you rely on the Big 12 type of thing, you look up in the third quarter and your defense is looking for IVs or something. They're shot, and once you're I learned this a long time ago playing tennis. Once you exceed your maximum heart rate of things, once you exceed that real point, you cannot really recover. Your body can't recover, and that's the whole thing that's got that's done out there with conditioning. Who's the better conditioned team? Who can really get in the fourth quarter and sustain that? But it's going to be an odd thing here.
Coach O's done a great job with that.
No, he has, but
sure.
but it's going to be one of the things it's going to be is time of possession.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an overlooked data point in time of possession because it catches up with you. It just does. I mean, you can't go and play in these SEC West teams and not feel that will catch up with you at some point. Because if you're on defense and you're running and you're chasing and all that other stuff and you're getting – and you really saw it last week against Georgia. Georgia just made Florida was gassed. Florida's absolute gas. They're really outstanding defense, I think.
We call that crock-potting.
Well,
slow cook.
Yeah. Well, that was it. So that's one of the things. Who's going to be able to sustain drives, and who's going to be able to play better defenses? And here's what else you're going to see in this game. You're going to see some weird stuff. Somebody's going to pull out some goofy, sandlot play. Quarterback throwback. They're going to have a run of wildcat. Who knows?
It would surprise me if they don't, but I'm with you.
Yeah, it's going to happen. Okay.
So you got to tell me now. Who do you think wins? So let me go first. I'll tell you this much. I'm preparing for a loss just because Alabama hasn't lost to LSU in a very long time. I don't know, what is it, 7 years now?
Well, yeah, but that was 7. That was 9. That was a start. That was a loss with an asterisk because 9-6 on a controversial play. But anyway, be that as it may. Go ahead.
I would talk about that game plenty more.
Yep.
We lost because we missed 3 chip shot field goals and 2 more beyond 25 from a kicker who just never missed.
Yep.
The poetic justice of him scoring the first 15 points in that national championship game rematch is not lost on me. That team was terrific. And if we had a playoff, it would have made a lot more sense then. But we have it now. Let's cherish it. However, with that said, Alabama's special team sucks right now. And if this game ends up being close and it comes down to kicking, once again, I think Alabama loses kicking, just like they did the last time they lost to LSU.
Yeah.
The last 3 years, LSU averages 3.3 points per game against Alabama. Joe Burrow did throw a completion into the end zone last year, but it was to Mac Wilson. To be fair, we don't have a guy like Mac Wilson out there. The guy who replaced Dylan Moses is Shane Lee, who's a true freshman. We call him the Hulk. I don't know where that nickname came from, but it's not a bad nickname if you're playing defense at Alabama. Sure. But he's looked lost, confused. He's missed tackles. He's been out of position. He's made some really bad fundamental tackles. He has potential. Most of these guys do. I would argue that they're looking better, that they're improving, sort of like Penn State. We have these opinions about Penn State that were based on what we saw early. Man, they sure have gotten a lot better. Sort of like Clemson. I wouldn't say it was a wake-up call, but I don't know why I wouldn't say it. But that North Carolina close win on the road was, well, it certainly was effective at sparking some energy in them, that's for sure. Alabama has not had a great schedule to date, but I do think they've played elite-level football. I'm not convinced, though, that LSU is one of the best teams in the country. I'm not convinced Alabama is either. But I think we'll see it. And I do think they're one of the best in the sense that they're top 5, 6, maybe, whatever. But we can't say for sure. I do feel comfortable saying that Ohio State and Clemson do sort of stand out at 1A, 1B, or 1 and 2, or whatever you want to do with that. Okay. I don't think Tua is the outlier. I think Tua, I heard somebody talking just today about how's he going to be able to throw. He just had surgery on his right foot. I mean, that's important when you're throwing on your launch foot. And I thought to myself, well, by the way, he's a lefty. Things like that. Don't forget. Also, this surgery, we saw him after the surgery in the playoff, and yet there was last year. There was less time to recover, but I think that was also indicative of the other surgery, the problems he had with his knees. However, we've seen some footage of him in practice, and even when he had the injury, he didn't look injured. just didn't look hurt this year. But he did have surgery to make sure that this injury doesn't happen again. It's a fascinating thing that I won't get into much, but basically it's a bionic commando kind of thing. It makes his ankles stronger than both of them would be without the surgery. It makes this type of injury impossible. Also, how bad do you think he's injured? If you had to give a percentage, is he 75%? Is he 50%? What can a 50% Tua do throwing off of his good foot because he's a lefty? Enough to beat LSU? I have struggled trying to come up with an answer, but my answer is yes, and roll tide. I really think Alabama has the potential to show that they're a better football team this weekend, and it's going to come down to game plan and mistakes, and who makes fewer of them. I hope it's not Alabama, but man, this game it's going to be fun.
Yep.
And roll tide.
Roll tide, and it's going to be great. It should
The old
be great.
mating call.
Another great game. Hopefully, it will be a great game, being single-digit win for some team.
There's been a lot of arguments about Tua not playing his best football against the best teams. I would argue, isn't that everybody? But the truth is, he's actually played really great football against some really great teams. Clemson notwithstanding. Again, that was the worst loss Nick Saban's had at Alabama. It's the only loss he's had with 15 points scored, 15 points more for the margin or more. In that same time frame, Ohio State is second place with 6, and Clemson is tied for third at 20. 20 games that they lost by more than 15 points. And I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. I'm just saying that game was an outlier for sure.
Well,
doesn't necessarily make Tua bad, but yeah, he got torched all night long.
Yeah. Well, whatever.
That could happen this weekend too, but I doubt it.
It won't be that way. Clemson, let's be brutally honest. They had a phenomenal defensive line last year. I mean, these guys are getting after it in the NFL. The talent level for these guys to stay on to do what they did, I think was really was incredible. And Venables
I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that team.
No, that was. I mean, when Christian came in, I remember even before he stepped on the field, I'd heard coming out of he came out of up in Massachusetts, Springfield, I believe it was. But anyway, they had a fabulous defensive line, and not certain about the secondary last year. I think it was really pretty good. And they had Hunter Renfrow, and he's one of my I thought Hunter Renfrow's just
heard of him.
And he's doing well. He's doing really well in the pros, but he's one of those guys like that. He's
to watch. At the Raiders of all places. The Raiders. It's crazy.
But it is, and he's having a great season. But look at that game. Maybe Tua didn't have his greatest game, whatever. But Clemson was just quite the defensive line, and you can't ever overlook that.
It was sort of everything. It was a perfect storm. It was a great game plan. It was an exceptional game plan.
So in this game, Alabama's got to play a lot better. There are a lot of intangibles here, yada 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 again. But LSU's been they've been through some tough games with some tough teams, and they've been at home. They've won at home. All these things, I don't know.
They won at Texas.
Yeah, but Texas, give me a break. Texas.
Well, I mean, I wish we'd have played Texas. That was a good win. At Texas?
Yeah, it was.
We're going there in a couple of years, right? Alabama, I mean.
Yeah, but
that looks fun.
Texas was supposed to be better this year than they really were.
Put Texas on Clemson's schedule 2021, and now we don't have the same argument. Now there's no worry.
So
whatever we say about Texas.
So they did. Okay, let's give them that. Let's give them the Auburn, Florida. There's a lot of. They've had a lot of quality. They've had a lot of quality wins against quality teams. So give them that. That will be hard for Alabama to overcome. Alabama's got to overcome again the resume of mistakes, penalties, third down situations that have not been good because they are young on defense. It's just that's the deal. A prolific offense. Nobody can stop this offense. Nobody can stop this offense, at least in college football.
Well, that's certainly not LSU. I'll say that.
No, they can't. But then again, I don't think that can happen. I just think we'll see some a play here or there. That's always in a game like this. And Coach Brown always just saying, close game. It's always the kicking game that makes a difference. And if Bulovas is not able to do what he was supposed to do, And when you say special teams, I'll take a little bit of an issue with that because I think Waddle and the new punter, number 99.
Good point.
When you say what you're talking about is kicking, and I understand that. When you're talking about really is place kicking.
Well, what I was going to suggest is that the last decade or so, Alabama has had some really exceptional kickers, punters, and return guys. You mentioned Javier Arenas. Thank God you mentioned him. What a great dude. Love Javi. But I mean, J.K. Scott, Tippett, there's been great guys. And
he's doing great.
Alabama missed more. Last year the narrative was Alabama's the number one team in the country and the rest of y'all, right? The Roy buzz kind of came as a result of that, and Clemson sure did latch on, became a thing under the branding. I get it. But I think Alabama missed more points after the touchdown, extra points, than anybody in the country, and they've missed them in more games than not again this year. Yep. It's not a highlight. Yep. That's all I'm saying. It's not a highlight.
Got to play better fundamental football to be honest. You got to be
true. There's a lot of flaws on this team.
Football to win this football game.
A lot of flaws.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
Not as many on offense.
Well, but all the things that Saban is saying, we'll get better. We got to do better at this. Alabama's not really gotten better at a lot of those things. So especially against people like Arkansas, but a lot of unforced errors even in that game. That you can't do that. You can't do that against LSU.
Henry Ruggs caught a touchdown in the back. The ref called him out of bounds, and they reviewed it and said he wasn't. But meanwhile, nobody was paying attention to Devontae Smith. Got absolutely trucked. You can make an argument for targeting him because the guy leads with his head, dips his head down, and this guy was in the air defenseless. But Devontae Smith comes down hard. He got flipped in the air and came down on his neck. Scary moment. He got up. I guess he had some sort of shoulder injury, a sprain or something. That he'll be all right for this game. But okay. Wow, that was terrifying. Didn't want to see that. All right, let's just break down some of these other games real quick. Clemson traveling to North Carolina State for their homecoming. Yeah, which they often do, which is a weird time for homecoming if you ask me, but it's not uncommon. It's Dave Dorn, who he's one of the few coaches I have less respect for than most, in particular with his relationship with Clemson.
And the computer
I think doing this with homecoming, trying to get your
It's
team into it, your fans into it more, isn't going to help. I think Clemson wins this one big. I believe it's a 35-point spread. I'm not looking at anything right now. How are you going to call this one? Does Clemson cover the spread? Can we just say Clemson's going to win? NC State's not a good team this year. They have been in the past. They're not this year.
Yeah, they have, but they'll get gassed by Clemson. Through the air on the ground, it's like the Marines. It's going to be ugly. Okay.
Dabo, the culture is upset, but Dabo himself has been very publicly upset as well. In direct, explicit relation to what the media has said. I don't like that message. I don't like it coming from coaches. That's personal. You can take it however you want. However, he is mad.
Okay.
I don't think that matters in terms of wanting to run up the score. I think the score gets run up on accident. I think Clemson covers.
They'll have breakaways. Clemson will have a lot of breakaway plays, meaning passes and runs, both. So it will maybe be a better game than Wofford was, but we'll see. I don't know.
So I'm thinking, is Wofford a better team? I actually like Wofford, so I'm a little conflicted there. I don't want to sound like a jerk.
But it'll be ugly. It'll be a clear day, clear, cool, and Clemson's type of day. And it's ridiculous. They're outmatched.
Okay.
It's not okay.
Well, and it's North Carolina, those damn Yankees. We don't need them. Meanwhile, back here in the Palmetto State, the South Carolina Gamecocks are hosting App State. App State has been competitive. They've been good, fundamental football, fun to watch, interesting. South Carolina has been great and really bad and really good and often worse. And I can't tell who they are week to week. That's why I have no idea how to pick this game. What do you think?
It's not a big deal. I think South Carolina's going to win this game. And I think it's pretty straightforward. When you go down and do what they did against Georgia and really had a great defensive scheme against Georgia, had some. Let's look at the Tennessee game. When they played Tennessee has been playing up to some of their potential. I know you like to hear that.
Again with Tennessee.
Okay, right. So,
I mean, what kind of podcast do you think we're running here, Bob?
Okay. I don't want to.
I'm just teasing.
I'm just saying that I think Will is doing a good job down there. I think the quarterback's doing a really good job, Linsky, and I think they won't have any problems with that game. So I think that'll be pretty straightforward.
Forget the name of the other quarterback, who now looks really exciting, but it doesn't matter. I don't know what they're going to do. Maybe they'll play him. Maybe they won't. That's been part of the problem with the culture too. Is they're angry about make a choice, make a different choice, make a better choice, but whatever. So I don't know.
Muschamp will out. Muschamp's going to do a good job. He's a defensive guy, and he's doing better there. So
do they beat App State at home?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. No question.
I'm going to go Cox on this one.
Sure.
They're fighting to get bowl eligible, and they need this win. This is important.
Yep.
So let's just give it to them.
Yep.
I say they win.
Mm-hmm.
Georgia hosts Missouri. Now, don't forget, last year, let's see, I was at the Texas A&M game, and Georgia was at Missouri, and they were losing. And it was a tight game. I can't remember if it was rainy. It was overcast, kind of like today. But, Georgia came back and won by, I think, 4 points. It was a weird scoring game. Do you remember that game?
Yeah, I do. I remember that game. And other teams.
You know who else remembers that game?
Yeah.
Georgia.
Yeah, right.
Georgia loves revenge.
Well, that's fine.
Missouri's not great this year. Bloodbath.
It will be, and it'll be on a clear, cool day between the hedges. So Georgia won't have any problem. See, really, I always look at the weather factor, but it'll be a pretty solid game. Even though I don't know what the line is, but there's going to be a letdown with Georgia coming off the Florida game because they had 2 weeks to rest, and so there'll be a letdown. Do they cover? I don't think they'll cover, but I think they'll. I don't know what they'll do with Fromm because should they rest him a little bit because they got Auburn the following week, and I'm pretty sure that's at
Auburn. Oh yeah,
at Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because Auburn finishes with Auburn, Georgia at Auburn, Alabama at Auburn. So anyway, that's what I think about that one. What's next?
So Georgia's got Missouri, then at Auburn, then at A&M. Which that's just not fun travel.
Yeah, right.
And then no, I'm sorry, they get A&M at home, and then they're at Georgia Tech.
A&M has the
worst
worst pass defense they have no pass defense. But anyway,
it's disappointing. Let's just leave it at that. Clemson has. Let me go back to this because they have NC State and then Wake Forest on the road next week, which is, I believe, the only other ranked team in the league right now, which is fine. It's incidental. The Wake Forest is legitimately competitive. They're fun to watch. They're better than last year.
Okay.
I don't think they're anywhere close to being competitive with Clemson at all whatsoever.
If I recall, they were picked to be 4th or 5th in their division, but I can't recall which one.
But then a bye week before South Carolina in Columbia. It's interesting. That should be a fun one.
Okay.
Let's see. Baylor is playing at TCU, whose TCU is favored by 2.5. I picked Baylor. Who do you got?
I got to go with Baylor. I think they're really a better team. I don't know
the Bears,
the Horny Frogs. No, I'm not buying that.
Black and brown and covered with hair.
Oh yeah, they are. So I think
love the Bears.
Bears. Go Bears. How do you say that in Chicago?
The Bears.
Da Bears.
Da Bears.
Okay. The Bears.
Da Bears.
Like
I'm going with the Bears.
I'll go with the Bears. Okay.
I'm trying to remember now off the top of my head. Oregon. Who did they play?
Oh,
don't do that. I'm not looking it up, and it doesn't matter. We've gone way beyond our limit here.
Okay,
but,
all right.
Then, again, the big one to me is Alabama LSU.
Yep.
I hope this game isn't close because I don't think that's necessarily good for anybody. It adds more confusion. I don't think it's close either. I think one team wins by 2 scores or more. My opinion is it's Alabama, but I am sincerely preparing for a loss.
Yeah,
so, and you know what? If you're going to lose, you know me, Dad. My rule number 1 is every team loses football games.
Yep.
Period. It's only a question of time. It's also a question of how and when you lose. They remember November, like you and Dabo Sweeney said. However, preparing for a loss, expecting a win for the Tide.
Yeah, it may not be Alabama's year. It's just one of those things.
Well, if that's the truth, if that's the case, then it'll be the first time they're out of the playoff. How would you feel about that? How would you feel? Let me elaborate. How would you feel about Alabama going to a bowl game, a really good bowl game likely, right? Against another, sort of perennial blue blood with basically no pressure. It would be sort of bittersweet to see, Jerry Jeudy, Tua Tagovailoa. It'd be their last game.
Right.
But we saw that with Julio Jones and Greg McElroy against Michigan State, too, and that was a slaughter.
There were other the quarterback at Michigan State was not 100% either, but that was down in Orlando, and everybody was cramping up. It was like 95 degrees in January.
Greg McElroy was putting blocks out there for Julio Jones. Those guys were angry and fierce, and nobody really stood a chance against them that day because they lost 3 that year.
but you got to earn your way into the playoff. You can't. I don't really like this thing about backing your way. I'm too much old school. I was thinking, I thought the BCS kind of had it right. Even when we had the two teams, you only had two teams. You had the top two teams, whether they were,
whether or not it was right is incidental. To me, it just wasn't nearly as exciting as the playoff. Even though some of these games in the first round have been blowouts, just having these matchups is good. It's not bad. Selfishly, it's what I want to see. I wish we did it more deliberately. I wish we used the College Football Playoff Committee rankings for any sort of scheduling except basically 2 games plus, for the next year or something.
Yep.
Everybody has a game. Again, I'm going on a tangent, but
well,
there's just so much more competition out there right now than I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm talking fundamental competition.
Right. So we'll see how
the Power 5 crap. We need 8 so we can fit 6 in, not 5. You got to. I hate that number. I hate the word Power 5.
Yeah.
How much better would the American Athletic Conference, the AAC, be if they were considered a quote-unquote power conference? You think that wouldn't benefit them? They're already competing consistently for years at a high competitive level. But, again, don't get me started on the AAC. They just had their moment. I know. I love it. Go Memphis.
Well, we have – no matter – you got to like I started first. You got my buddies, David and Jordan, and they just love college football. Let's just take their perspective from these two fabulous Clemson alums and look at it and say, man, no matter, you got 4 teams that are coming in healthy and the 4 teams, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know who it's going to be. I think that again, intangibles, LSU, Alabama. I think LSU has the proven been through the fire, been through some really tough teams, and prevailed. So, I would say that it goes to LSU. It won't next year because they lose too much. They lose a ton of talent. But this may be LSU's year, maybe Oregon's year, it may be Ohio State's year, maybe Clemson's year. Who knows? It could be Penn State's year. But
I hope
if
not.
It's not,
I don't like James Franklin.
Yeah, I know.
And I tell you what, I sure do like James.
And it won't be Penn State. Okay, let's just.
I sure do like Ryan Day at Ohio State. What an upgrade to me over Urban Meyer.
No question. And
how I
look
feel
what he's
about
done.
it.
So,
Quietly, the best surprise secret.
Just don't take anything about away from the 4 teams that will be in that the playoff, and it'll be great. No matter who it is, it'll be great.
And speaking of not taking it away, if you don't believe that Alabama and LSU are the top 2 or 3 or whatever in the country, fine. Where do you put them? 5, 6, 7, 8? That's fine. But just remember that. You can secretly enjoy this game if you must.
Yeah.
But enjoy this game. Anytime we get good teams, let alone great teams to play each other, it is something to celebrate.
Yeah, it is. That's what
this game is legitimately good.
Yeah, this is the playoff. This is legitimately a playoff game, and these are 2 of the top teams.
Try to enjoy it out there, people.
And if these 2 teams were to be were able to get into January with all that time off to get healthy and everything else, they would be formidable foes for anybody. So let's just leave it at that. But this is 2019. We got a playoff. We didn't have a playoff years ago. We had 2, the BCS. We back in the day, we didn't have a playoff. It was in the end of the season.
Yeah.
UPI and AP said, this is a champion.
Well, and more to the point, some of the recent playoff winners, arguably the best team in the country that given year, would not have been in under the BCF. So the playoff to me is an insurmountably better format, and it's still flawed. It's flawed by nature.
It is flawed by
nature. I finally came around on expansion
expansion
this week. I really did. I've been kind of against it, but I think that's largely because of how much more beneficial the playoff is and how much more I love this fundamental stuff. But yeah, it's time to start including other things.
Well, teams change throughout the course of the season, so that's one thing. But here's the other thing about that. If you're in a comparison to the playoff, look at the NCAA basketball. I mean, how close.
What kind of podcast do you think this is, Ted?
What makes the best team in the country? And sometimes it's undisputed, and it could be this year if a team were to emerge unscathed, and that would be indisputable. But anyway, that's where we are on the 11/7, 7/11, however you want to say it, the 7th of November. The Europeans would say that's 7/11. So that's where we're today, and we got a couple more weeks, and see what changes, see what upsets that we never thought would happen. So who knows?
Gosh, you're right about that. That happens every year.
Yep, every year.
Every single year.
Yep.
You got anything else you want to leave us with?
God bless. Have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy your family. I can't think of anything else. Mark Sturgis, your thoughts and prayers.
Yes, sir.
He's out there. He's really a fine person. And I'll just.
We love you, Mark, and we miss hearing you on the radio. That's the truth.
We do. You're a 5-star man.
Absolutely.
5-star. Absolutely. Okay. Outside of that,
I have secret plans to get him on the podcast, by the way. I really do.
he'd do a great job, better than anybody I could ever imagine. But except for David and Jordan. I'm just teasing. But no, he'd be great. He'd be great.
The one thing that I have before we go real quick is that, I do think Clemson's going to cover even if it's a side effect.
Oh, sure.
But I just realized, number one, I already said Dabo's mad already. The one coach that he's been publicly critical of and doesn't like is Coach Dave Doran at NC State.
Yeah, right.
Well, this homecoming for NC State, the Wolfpack, I think it's going to be real bad.
Yeah,
I really do.
And that's fine. I don't know. Whatever. That's good. And it could be, and that it is what it
look,
is.
Style Points got Ohio State into the very first playoff, and they won that year. They won the national championship, and I think deservedly so. But that 59-0 over Wisconsin with Melvin Gordon was the reason why.
Yep.
I don't know if Clemson needs that this year, but I certainly won't be disappointed if that's what we get to see, even if it is an accident.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. We'll see.
All right. First of all, one of my favorite words, metallurgist. Just rolls off the tongue like cellar door,
Metallurgist.
Just a good feeling.
Oh, thank you very much.
If I had to pick the number one metallurgist, it'd be you.
Well, thank you very much for that. That's a lot of people would want to see a playoff for that, but who knows? It's been fun. It's been great career doing those types of things.
And I would put you at number 5 for dads of all time, but you're moving up.
Yeah,
it's trending up.
Yeah,
No, I love you, Dad. I'm so glad. Thanks for doing this. This was a nice surprise. I'm glad it worked out this way.
Well,
so thanks again, and roll tide.
William, you are amazing, and I love what's going on with you. Love you, and roll tide, go Tigers, and let's see who the number one team is. Should be great.
We got plenty of time. We're going to savor these next few weeks, all right? And what I don't savor, I savor doing my iONGreenville.net picks.
Yeah.
So go do your picks.
Yeah,
take your time.
Yeah,
try to enjoy it.
Yeah.
If you forget, just do it when you can.
Yeah,
but
right.
if you can take your time, do some research, dive a little bit deeper into the sport and the golden age that we're living in right now with competitiveness from coast to coast. Try to enjoy it.
I got it.
If you can't read, get an adult
Yeah.
and go to FetGreenville.com.
Ooh.
Read Fet Greenville Weekly.
Yeah.
Comes out every single Wednesday. It's all digital. It's all free. It's all good, Dad.
And if you don't read it, if you do read it more, and also have your friends read it, because it sets the stage for everything that's good in Greenville. It really does. But that Ion Greenville, what is happening, all those good things. It's great stuff.
We're also produced by GVO Media. If you are interested in creating a podcast like this one, only better, call me, hit me up anytime. Hit up GVOmedia.online. Hit me up at Color of Gray on Twitter, Color of Gray Studio on Instagram. And we're here to help, right in the heart of downtown Greenville at Sit and Spin Studios. Can't miss it, can't beat it.
Augusta Road, Augusta Street.
There you go.
GVO Media.
That's it.
There at Augusta, but it is
right in the heart of the West End.
It is amazing, and it is media.
We're having sort of a private open house in 2 weeks on a Monday. If you're interested in coming to check it out, if you are curious about being a podcast, if you want to punch me in the mouth but you're afraid to walk up to me, that's fine. Or if you really just want to shake my hand, hit me up.
How much does it cost?
The low price of free.
Oh, no. Really?
Afraid so.
Parking also?
Oh, yeah. It's City of Greenville, baby. You know how it goes.
Well, I'll be there.
All right. You better be there. All right. Thanks, Dad. You're the best. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Go Tigers. Go Dogs. F you all the time. We'll see y'all later.
Right.
Peace.
Purple people.
Not red, not blue, not white, not green, just gray. Just gray.